In 2006, Moscow police searched a seemingly ordinary apartment and found a chessboard. But instead of knights and pawns, the owner had placed 62 metallic coins across the grid. Each coin represented a human life he had taken. He left only 2 squares empty. This was Alexander Pichushkin. By night, he was burying dozens of people in a single city park. By day, he stacked shelves at a local supermarket, made small talk with his neighbors, and went completely unnoticed by the authorities for 14 years. Serial killers who evade capture for that long usually possess a terrifying capacity for cold, calculated discipline. Pichushkin was the exact opposite. He suffered from a physical brain defect that left him largely incapable of biological self-control. To understand how 48 people could vanish into a single park without raising the alarm, we have to look at how a fractured mind builds a mechanical system to replace the restraint it inherently lacks. At age 4, Pichushkin fell backward from a swing, striking his head on a heavy metal bar on the way down. The impact caused severe damage to his frontal cortex, severing his ability to regulate anger and resulting in explosive outbursts. But his grandfather taught him chess. The 64-square board offered a closed system with fixed rules, where his chaotic mind found absolute control. When his grandfather died, that structure vanished. Adrift as a teenager, Pichushkin filled the void with a dark new obsession: Andrei Chikatilo, the Soviet serial killer executed for murdering 52 people. Pichushkin decided he would surpass him. The chessboard he kept in his apartment served a very specific mechanical purpose. By assigning one murder to each square, he created a rigid external framework to channel the violent impulses his own brain could not physically stop. He tested this framework in 1992, at age 18. He shared his 64-square plan with a classmate, and when the classmate balked and tried to back out, Pichushkin strangled him on the spot. He walked home and placed the first coin on the board. Yet, despite a brief police interview where he was released for lack of evidence, Pichushkin stopped killing entirely for several years. Because he possessed almost zero internal restraint, his behavior was governed by the ultimate external boundary, the Soviet state's promise to execute him if he was caught. That boundary disappeared in 1996, when Russia placed a moratorium on the death penalty. Pichushkin later stated that once the state removed the threat of his execution, the enormous effort required to hold back his urges lost its meaning. Stripped of his only biological defense mechanisms, and now operating in a society that had dismantled its highest punitive consequence, his self-imposed rules were the only things left holding him back, and soon he unleashed them. In 2001, he deployed his system in earnest. He chose a specific geography, Bitsa Park, a vast forested area in southern Moscow, and he chose specific targets: marginalized homeless men, alcoholics, and neighbors from his own apartment building, people who either trusted him or whose disappearances wouldn't trigger immediate police searches. He approached them with a bottle of vodka and asked if they would join him in the woods to drink in memory of his deceased dog. Once they were deep in the trees and highly intoxicated, he attacked them from behind with a hammer. To maintain his closed system, he dragged the bodies to one of the many sewer access points hidden throughout the park and dropped them into the dark drainage network below. Pichushkin would later tell investigators that the physical violence required almost no effort. The true challenge was the weight. He had to sit with his victims, share the vodka, and watch them slowly lower their defenses, all while suppressing his urge to strike immediately. His entire process, the deliberate pacing, the repeated script, the hidden disposal, served as a grueling daily exercise. He was forcing a damaged brain to simulate the exact patience and impulse control it lacked by nature. A closed system survives only as long as its rules are strictly followed. But by 2003, his ego began demanding an audience. He stopped dropping victims into the sewers and started leaving them exposed near the footpaths, deliberately forcing Moscow to realize a killer was hunting in the park. The final breakdown of his discipline arrived in February 2006. A newspaper incorrectly reported that the Bitsa Maniac had been caught. Reading this in his apartment, his damaged frontal cortex flared into an uncontrollable rage. The following week, he walked into the park and murdered someone entirely to prove headlines wrong. 4 months later, he made his fatal error. He invited a supermarket coworker, Marina Moskarmyova, into the park. She was suspicious enough of his behavior that before leaving her home, she wrote a note to her son explicitly stating she was walking with Alexander Pichushkin. Pichushkin actually knew she had left the note. His strict rulebook dictated he should walk away from such a massive risk. Instead, the biological impulse to kill hit him like an electric current, overriding logic entirely. He murdered her anyway, completely shattering the system that had protected him. That paper trail led police straight to a Moscow metro ticket in Marina's pocket. Investigators pulled the station's surveillance footage, which clearly showed her walking through the turnstile, right beside Pichushkin. After 14 years, the hunt was over. At his trial, he didn't hide. Placed inside a reinforced glass cage, he engaged the media, eagerly walking investigators through his crimes, and boasting about filling 62 squares of his chessboard for an attentive, captive audience. He was convicted of 49 murders and sent to solitary confinement at the Polar Owl, a remote Arctic supermax prison. Today, he attempts to maintain the last scraps of his dominance by occasionally offering to confess to 11 more murders, strictly on his own schedule. He ultimately fell short of his ultimate goal, but he wasn't stopped by overwhelming forensic evidence or superior police work. He was caught because a broken mind's attempt to impose perfect order on its own violent urges has a time limit. No rigid, artificial system can permanently contain human chaos.
True Files Archive.